David's thoughts, particularly on technology. And again, I think a lot of investors are selling tech along with everything else, as David mentioned. But as he was also saying, those are good businesses going into the crisis. There'll be good businesses coming out of the crisis, and there'll be some attractive valuations there for investors as when we do, in fact, get to the other side. Right now, let's get a Bloomberg Business Flash with John Tucker. John, what do you have for us?
All right, thanks, Paul and Lisa. Right now, well, we're off the worst levels of the session. Still down close to 10% for all the major averages. The Dow is down 9.6%, down 2,211. The S&P 500, 248 points lower, Paul. That's down just over 9%. The Nasdaq Composite Index today down 714 points, a 9% decline there. Again, I return to that volatility index, 75. That is an extraordinary number. Just today alone, up about 30%, that measure of volatility. Where is the money going? That is actually hard to pin down right now. We do see dollar strength. Now, as far as treasuries, there is an extraordinary bid to treasuries, but the yields right now not as low as they have been. The benchmark 10-year, 8.0%. That's down 16 basis points. The 2-year, 0.38. That's 10 basis points lower. The 30, 1.42. We've seen much lower yields on the long bond than that. As far as oil goes right now, Brent crude, that is down $3.23. The international benchmark down 9.7%. Right now it's at $30.54 barrel. And you look at copper, they call it Dr. Copper because it's considered the only commodity with a PhD in economics. That was down over 5%. We check the markets all day long for you, especially on days like this. The next circuit breaker would be at 13 right now, down 13%. But again, the Dow down about 9.5% right now. I'm John Tucker here in the Bloomberg Newsroom with that Bloomberg Business Flash. Lisa and Paul, back to you guys.
Thank you so much, John. We're talking a lot about the market response to the spreading coronavirus. I'd love to get the medical take, and Max Neeson's the perfect guy to do it. He's a Bloomberg Opinion healthcare columnist joining us by phone. And Max, I'd love to get your sense of where we are in terms of the spread. What's the state of play?
Max also social distancing himself from us, Lisa.
Yeah,
becoming a theme.
Well, we'll work on it. We're working on. Everyone is working on this. Which actually is an interesting issue that a number of people have raised, which is all across Wall Street, all of the trading desks, all of the infrastructure is being changed as people are being told to work from home, and there is a question of how much that's disrupting the actual activity in markets right now as well. We have A groups and B groups and black teams and green teams, et cetera. And there's a question of, at what point this impairs the basic functioning of trading, let alone the rest of businesses around the world.
Yeah, Vince Signorello had a good comment on that before. He was saying, back at the last crisis, we had, essentially fully staffed trading desks across all the investment banks, and they were both agency traders facilitating trades as well as position traders willing to put up some capital. And you don't have that nearly to the degree now that you did then, given some of the changes that have been made to the industry post-crisis. So from Vince's perspective, that contributed to some of the volatility we're seeing in here, particularly on the downside here. So, but one of the interesting things I want to hear when we do speak with Max is just to get a sense of, kind of where we are with the test, because that kind of goes to, when will we get a sense of when this thing is peaking?
Yeah.
Let me see.
Well, and honestly, I will say that there is also a question of human psychology in the meantime. But I think that it's a really valid point, which is testing is key to even assess how broadly this has spread. Max Neeson, let's try you again. Can you give us just a state of play of where we're at in terms of the spread of the virus?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you look at the kind of currently published count, it looks like we're, in the 3,000s, a little further back from some of the European countries that are seeing spikes. But, as I always try to emphasize, that is more a function of the testing lag than it is, the notion that the reality, that the actual number of cases is any lower, just given, the amount and the number of places where we're seeing the spread of the virus. It's likely that once we get testing online in a greater volume, and that genuinely is beginning to happen. Although, still some time before we're at the level that we'd like to be. There is going to be a spike of cases. That's not necessarily a bad thing in the sense that it'll, make it clear the extent to which it's spread. Hopefully, convince people of the magnitude and the need to comply with these sort of elevated CDC guidelines and social distancing measures, and just being able to, quarantine who you need to quarantine and direct care for those who need it. So there will be a spike, but that's a good thing.
So, Max, just give us a sense of kind of where we are in terms of getting the testing to the level it needs to be, broadly disseminated, across the country. Obviously, it's been a much bigger lag than anybody would have liked. Is there a sense that the testing will be broad enough and robust enough in a week, 2 weeks, a month, 2 months? Where are we?
I think, we're already in a better place than we were a week ago, and that will continue to improve over time. Kind of the big step forward, I think, that we're seeing is, enlisting these private labs and being able to test as well. That just makes for, a lot more distributed and testing that's a little bit less reliant on sort of the readiness or quality or, little things like how many pipettes different labs have for testing. Just so having that broader capability and that more distributed capability coming into play this week and in the weeks to come will mean a lot. Although, you still hear reports of people not getting tests who want them, and even, guidelines that for now it'll focus on healthcare workers, people with pre-existing conditions or severe symptoms. So hopefully, we're starting to get to the point where we can direct tests to the people we most need, and then in the weeks to come to do broader testing with the aim of getting this under control in a better way.
Max, what about medical remedies to the symptoms that coronavirus causes? Have we gotten any breakthroughs on that front?
Unfortunately, I can't say that we have yet. The nearest term potential remedy is a drug from Gilead. It's called remdesivir. That's in active clinical trials right now. It's a pre-existing drug originally developed for Ebola. Some anecdotal evidence of efficacy, but at the end of the day, that is a medicine that has to be, infused over a period of several days. It's not a prophylactic. It's not something that's going to be used extremely broadly in all likelihood. It's just reserved for particularly severe cases. It might boost outcomes. It might prevent some deaths, should it work after all in the end. But, we're still going to need the development in the longer term of a vaccine, of other prophylactic treatments, and those that are a little bit more convenient to use. That, unfortunately, is still several months, if not a year or more off.
Max Neeson, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate your thoughts. Max Neeson covers all things healthcare for Bloomberg Opinion. You can hear Max's opinion work and see it on Bloomberg.com/opinion, plus all the other great stuff coming out of Bloomberg Opinion. And on the terminal, you can go to OPIN Go. Lisa, just looking at the markets here, kind of off the bottom, we're down the S&P off about 8.3%. We had been off, closer to 12% earlier. So a little bit of a bounce off the bottom. But again, here, just continuing this downward motion as the markets try to discount in what is, arguably something that's very difficult to kind of get a handle on.
Right. And I'm looking at credit markets too. Just bonds are just being hammered. I'm looking right now. Every single bond in the junk bond index that's traded today has been down except for one. There is one not down. Wow. I mean, just to give you a sense of how broad-based the selling is. And there's a question again, how quickly can we get a response, and how big does it have to be to actually stem some of the uncertainty that we're seeing play out in markets?
Yeah, I'm also just finish this up, Lisa, just looking at the commodity space, particularly oil. Brent down 9.4%. That's $30.69 a barrel versus WTI. It's right at 30. So you remember that differential? They used to be $5, $6, $7. Now trading pretty much on par with one another. So just extraordinary movements. Yeah, extraordinary movements in the commodity space as well. Right now, let's head down to our 99.1 studios. in Washington, D.C. for World and National Headlines with Nathan Hager. Nathan, what do you have?
Well, Paul, New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut are banning gatherings of more than 50 people. Bars, restaurants, and gyms will close at 8 o'clock tonight, Wall Street time. And the U.S. Supreme Court is postponing its next set of arguments, all due to the coronavirus pandemic that now appears to be gaining speed outside Asia. U.S. Surgeon General Dr. Jerome Adams was on CNN this morning pleading for calm.
If we panic, and I worry about this, I worry that the reaction to the virus, the discrimination we're seeing, the stigma, people fighting in grocery stores can actually have the potential to harm as many people as the virus itself if we aren't careful.
In another interview with Fox News, Adams said the U.S. is at the same coronavirus level that Italy was 2 weeks ago. New York City became the last major city in the U.S. to shut down schools with its announcement late yesterday. Governor Andrew Cuomo explained the holdup on ABC's Good Morning America.
I've never had an issue with closing the schools, but I want to make sure, and I demanded, New York City, Westchester, Rockland, Nassau, Suffolk, I'm closing the schools. You must have that child care plan and a food program, because many students get their food, as you know, from the schools.
And even as the federal government mounts its response to the outbreak, it's also dealing with virtual threats. Sources tell Bloomberg the Department of Health and Human Services suffered a cyber attack last night, apparently aimed at slowing its systems. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. This is Bloomberg.
Vatsal Shah is Senior Project Engineer at Mott MacDonald, a global engineering consultancy with more than 16,000 employees. He earned his PhD at New Jersey Institute of Technology, and as an adjunct professor is helping NJIT students explore emerging technologies.
My focus is renewable markets, emerging technologies, the idea of floating cities. What are we doing to develop that? What will happen to the city on the water? Well, you're going to have waves hitting it. You're going to have solar. How are you going to develop plants? How are you going to develop vegetation and farming? That sort of thought process happens at NJIT. We actually plan out what will the city look like. How do we develop that so in 10 years we're actually ready to take on those challenges when we have our first development in the water? NJIT also has been doing a lot of work in self-healing materials, so taking the polymers and the new material that we have in our material sciences departments and putting them into things like concrete, things like steel, reinforcing our soil.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. I came out in the 11th grade. Nobody was embracing you. The kids were cruel. It was very difficult to be gay. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma. The hard part was determining that I was going to do it, but I definitely didn't do it alone.
At age 30, with the help of her mentor, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
I have a mentor, Maria. She convinced me to continue my education and to finish what I started to get my diploma. Just never judges. She's a true role model. If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, go get it. You can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
In-depth analysis.
Night is still young, but a little late to get into the wrong ride, don't you think? That's why I choose Ola. With secure start codes unique to every user, there's no way anyone can ride a car that's meant for you. Good night.
Ride the change with Ola. Download and sign up now. Enjoy no surge pricing until the 12th of April.
Hey, have you heard? The Mayor of London has launched his latest van scrappage scheme to help tackle London's toxic air. Small businesses or sole traders like me with a polluting van could now get £7,000, which you could use to trade up to a Euro 6 vehicle. And you could get an extra £2,500 towards running costs if you go electric. The scheme is now even easier to qualify for, and it's open to any businesses with up to 50 employees, like mine. So, I'm going to search TfL scrappage to see if I'm eligible and apply. You should do the same. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
At the the Bank of Santander, they've created Stan, a smart bot that can predict the future of remortgaging.
All right, Stan, will my mortgage rate go up?
1955 was the last time Newcastle won the cup.
No, try not to mumble.
Playing, let's get ready to rumble.
Meanwhile, at Santander, they can't predict your future, but they'll help secure it with great mortgage rates fixed for up to 10 years. See what's possible at Santander.
Early repayment charges apply. Lending subject to status and criteria. Your home may be repossessed if you do not keep up repayments on your mortgage.
Dear Mum, happy Mother's Day. Thank you for teaching me to live life to the fullest, to say yes to things that scare me, and to always be 100% in the moment.
Morning, yogis. Time to untether from technology and shift our presence to only this room.
Spa day soon?
I said, time to untether from technology.
Love you to the moon and back, Jelly Bean. This Mother's Day, heartfelt can happen anywhere with moonpig.com. Get a free card with all flowers when you use code LOVEMUM. Download the app today. Exclusions apply.
Didn't get a seat on the train? Get the best seat in the house with a Sky Store movie tonight.
Philip asked me to marry him. No, love doesn't end well. Let us prove you wrong.
Stay in for a spellbinding night with Maleficent, Mistress of Evil.
I consider Aurora my own.
Watch the latest movie straight from the cinema.
We'll do our best to protect you.
Disney's Maleficent, Mistress of Evil. Available now in Sky Store.
Between game-winning shots and walk-off home runs.
Pitch. Swinging a line drive, slice down the right field line toward the corner. Looking up, and this one is gone!
Follow TuneIn on social media to stay in the game. From live reminders of the biggest games in every league, to staff pick recommendations of our favorite sports shows and podcasts.
Yeah, but you're really greedy, Dak, but nobody's thinking that
Skip,
yet.
You know how these contracts work. All that 40 years for 5 years for $200 million.
Follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to hear more sports.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
Leave it to the New York Times to make the most intelligent pop music podcast out there.
Welcome to the New York Times Popcast.
On the Popcast, the Times music staff gets together for a weekly roundtable on the hottest topics in popular music. From award show autopsies and reactions to new releases to difficult-to-process scandals and emerging themes in the music landscape, hear distinguished music critics share their perspectives on the latest music news, songs, albums, and artists of note on the New York Times Popcast. Search and favorite Popcast to join the conversation.
24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
I'm John Tucker in the Bloomberg Newsroom with this Bloomberg Business Flash, being brought to you by Witham, a forward-thinking, technology-driven advisory and accounting firm, helping clients be in a position of strength in today's modern business landscape. Visit Witham.com to learn more. Off the worst levels of the session right now for the major averages. The Dow Jones Industrial Average down 1,754 points. That's a decline of 7.6% right now. The S&P 500 down 192 points, a 7% decline. And the Nasdaq Composite Index 576 points lower. That is down 7.3%. Well, Goldman Sachs is predicting the U.S. economy is going to stagnate this quarter and contract by 5% in the second quarter, which starts in April. That would be the worst showing since the last recession. Again, the stocks are paring their losses, the S&P 500 trimming its decline to about 7%. And we're seeing injection of liquidity again by the Federal Reserve with their operations this morning. The Fed undertaking these operations to buy a variety of treasuries. This morning, they bought about $10 billion worth of securities to inject that into the system. Now, dealers submitted more than that. Over $37 billion was submitted by the dealers. Again, the Fed buying about $10 billion of that to inject liquidity into the system. Two-year yield right now, 0.37%. The 10-year at 0.83%. That is down 12 basis points. We check the markets for you every 15 minutes during the trading day. Days like this, we're checking them constantly. Paul and Lisa, back to you guys.
Thank you so much, John Tucker. Just as John was saying, we are off the lows, but still deeply in the red. And there's a question, especially since there is going to be some sort of recovery. The virus will end. Where do you find value? How do you find a compass in an unprecedented period of time? Joining us now, Carl Weinberg, founder and chief international economist at High Frequency Economics in New York. And based on your decades of experience, including the restructuring of Latin American crisis back in the 80s, I'm wondering, what are you looking for to determine the floor here and get a sense of it's time to buy?
Hi, good morning. Well, time to buy is more complicated than just economics. I'm focused on where the economy is going to be and how we're going to get through this bump. In my experience, the difference between a downturn and a crisis is whether or not things break. And the question is whether this break in income is going to be severe enough to cause institutions, companies to fail and get us to a point where when we come back, we're not as strong as we were as when we went into all of this.
So, Carl, what are some of the type of data that you're going to be looking at going forward to get a sense of whether this is, a little bit more of a short-term issue once we get to the other side of the virus, or perhaps something more fundamental to the global economy?
Well, here's what we're going to be discussing in our global webinar at High Frequency Economics later this week on Thursday morning, I believe. I'm looking at the data from China, and I'm looking at January, February figures, and I'm seeing 20% plus down on retail sales year over year for the January and February numbers. I'm seeing 13.5% down year over year on industrial production. And I'm wondering, could that happen here with our lockdown? They lock down, we're locking down. Why wouldn't we get the same result? And if we got that, I'm trying to guesstimate, because I've never seen anything like this before, what the impact of 2 or 3 months at that level of depressed activity would mean for the solvency of small and medium enterprises, and for that matter, for the solvency of big enterprises and the banks that service them. This is the scale of the question that I'm thinking about, and it's framed very much by the data from China. Auto production in China, by the way, dropped almost 80% year over year in February. These are enormous numbers, and again, one has to ask, if it happened there, why wouldn't similar declines happen here, and what would the consequences be?
So have you started to model that out?
I've started to think it out. I can't really model it, Lisa, because I don't have any historical data to hold it up against. So we're really in the realm of guesstimates, and that puts economics in the same place as where the medicine is. We're looking at potentially an unprecedented shock. I'll call it a supply shock, right, that reduces our capacity to work. It reduces the number of people who can get to their jobs, and that means we can produce less stuff. And along that, sliding that supply curve to the left, we end up with shortages of stuff, higher prices, a stagflation scenario with dramatically lower output. And frankly, Lisa, I'm just beginning to think about how to think about it.
So, Carl, we've seen the Federal Reserve come in aggressively over the weekend last night with lower rates and some QE. What do you think is that? Do you think that what this economy really needs is a comprehensive fiscal package coming out of Washington?
We need a package coming out of Washington, but I don't think we need traditional fiscal stimulus. All right. What we need to keep our financial system sound and safe, and I give the Fed and all the central banks of the world, except maybe for the Bank of Japan, high marks for ensuring that banks remain liquid, that they push credit to people and companies so that they can use it, that the only way to survive this kind of a shock is to introduce enough financing and credit into the economy so that we can spread the pain over an affordable and a survivable period of time. So what we need are programs to ensure that banks, whether they want to or not, pump credit out to companies that are suffering cash shortfalls and households, make it a credit, not a transfer, and then use that space of time that the credit allows to recover from what appears to be a much bigger shock than anyone had been thinking about until recently.
So you said that traditional fiscal stimulus would not be necessarily what was required, and yet you have a growing amount of speculation that anything from helicopter money to bailing out entire industries treasuries would be a productive, and not only productive, but crucial part of our recovery. I'm just going to throw this out there. AQR Capital Management's Cliff Asness, who is a self-described libertarian at times, said today on Twitter, I am not a libertarian about coronavirus, and saying we need, and I don't think I've ever said this before, fiscal help. We need fiscal relief for individuals and small and maybe large businesses. The Fed action was fine, and those who dismiss it are wrong. We should use all possible tools. Do you agree?
Sort of, but not entirely. If this is a supply shock, all right, it means we're making less stuff. So if we give people money in their pockets to replace the money they're not earning, all right, to make the stuff that's not being produced, we're going to have more money than goods, and we're going to create an inflation. Shifting the demand curve to the right, I think, is the wrong policy. Right? We need to get that supply curve moving back to the left, and we need to cushion what is an inevitable decline in income and loss of wealth coming out of this. And that's where we have to start being realistic, that if we keep people away from work for weeks or months, we're going to be poorer as a result of that. And the challenge is not to replace the income that's lost. You can't. The challenge is to bridge the adjustment to that lower level of income and lower level of wealth so that it's survivable. So I think that fiscal policy, credit is the right tool to do that. And the government's role in all of this is to ensure that banks make loans to people that they normally wouldn't make. All right. If you go to the bank and you say, I'm short of cash, I need a loan, you're not going to get it. All right, then the banks have to be prepared to make these kinds of bridging loans, I'll call them, so that people can get the credit they need to survive the next 6 months, so that when the virus goes away, businesses are still in business and households haven't lost their homes and their life savings and all of that. So we need to bridge through this trauma and then recover over time from it.
Carl Weinberg, thanks very much for joining us. We appreciate your thoughts as always. Interesting to put in context. I guess it's a question, Lisa, just kind of how long the medical aspect of this lasts. Is it a month? Is it 2 months? Obviously, the longer you go, Lisa, the more profound the economic impact will be. And that raises the question of what type of rebound will we have on the way back out?
Yeah, it's going to be a really tricky situation. People talking about $500 billion, $600 billion type of fiscal stimulus. There's also a question of timing. How quickly can they end up getting it, given the fact that this seems to be imminent? There's more of a concern that there's going to be actually a failure of some companies to be able to make their bills in near term. Right now, we're looking at stocks that are off their earlier lows, but still well in the red. I'm Lisa Abramowitz, along with Paul Sweeney, and this is Bloomberg Markets.
Take off with TUI on your next holiday with flights from 20 UK airports. From sun-kissed yoga classes to waking up to a swim-up room, you'll find plenty of ways to unwind. Book online today or visit your local store. At TUI, we cross the T's, dot the I's, and put you in the middle. Terms and conditions apply. Departures from May 2020. See website for details. At All Protected.
Hey, Big Ears.
What?
Have you heard?
What?
Ford are offering £20 off a spring service.
You what?
That's right. £20 off when you book online using code FORD20. Problem is...
What?
We're rabbits.
Book now at Ford.co.uk or search Ford Service. Retail customers at participating Ford dealers. Cannot be used with other Ford service promotions. Only one voucher per customer per booking.
This week's On the Media, the president thought he could defeat the narrative of COVID-19 with his usual tactic of, quote, censorship through noise. But the virus is proving resistant.
People's lives are going to be disrupted on a daily basis, and as that happens, the alternate reality he's created is inevitably going to implode.
Catch On the Media from WNYC. Listen to the On the Media podcast from WNYC studios on TuneIn today.
Between game-winning shots and walk-off home runs.
Pitch. Swinging a line drive, slice down the right field line toward the corner. Looking up, and this one is gone!
Follow TuneIn on social media to stay in the game. From live reminders of the biggest games in every league to staff pick recommendations of our favorite sports shows and podcasts.
Yeah, but you're really greedy, Dak, but nobody's thinking that
Skip,
yet.
you know how these contracts work. All that 40 years for 5 years for $200 million.
Follow at TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to hear more sports.
Want to know a quick, easy way to see if your favorite podcasts have a new episode available? Just go to the home screen on your TuneIn app and see the latest editions under the Your New Episode section. Happy listening.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
Out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just text EXPLORE to 64,000 and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or text EXPLORE to 64,000 and try it for free. Text EXPLORE to 64,000.
Have you ever thought, I wish I'd had that information sooner?
What does this tell us about the state of deal making?
Let's fix that.
One unprofitable company plus another doesn't make a profitable company.
Carol Mazur.
Talk to us about real-world applications.
Jason Kelly.
Remind us what the potential is for everyday folk.
Bloomberg Business Week.
Vice President of Exploratory Science is one of the cooler titles.
Weekday afternoons at 2 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg Business Week, now live on YouTube.
From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney.
Is there any bank right now in the U.S. that you think is a buy?
Do you think Chairman Powell has lost the market?
Jeff Bezos is no dope. What's the big ka-ching?
The big question, I think, for investors is free cash flow.
Breaking market news and insight from Bloomberg experts.
The U.S. tariffs actually hurt both China and the U.S.
Large strategics are looking to either buy or invest in innovation.
Soybeans and corn have been basically at or below the cost of production for about 4 or 5 years.
What we see more bonds, more yield.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Coming up, we're going to take a look at liquidity, specifically the commercial paper market. Is it there to support corporate America? Plus, we're going to speak with Mike McKee of Bloomberg to get his thoughts on the Fed's move and any type of coordinated response from global central banks that we can expect going forward. But first, let's go to John Tucker of Bloomberg News for a Bloomberg Business Flash. John, what do you have?
Well, we are firmly in the red, but the losses are being trimmed right now. Down right now for the Dow Jones Industrial Average, 8.2%. We're down 1,907 points. The S&P 500, the broader market there, is down right now about 7.7%, down 208 points. The Nasdaq Composite Index down 608 points. That's down 7.8% right now. Volatility still elevated over 75 right now for one measure of volatility. That would be the VIX. Well, America's economy showing the strain of the coronavirus. In a forecast by a major Wall Street firm, is projecting the sharpest quarterly drop since 2008. Let's get more from Vinny Del Giudice.
Goldman Sachs predicts the economy will stagnate this quarter and contract by 5% in the second quarter, which starts in April. That'd be the worst showing since the last recession. But Goldman also sees hefty rebounds, up 3% in the third quarter, up 4% in the fourth. Throughout history, the American economy has shown resilience, a comforting thought. Vinny Del Giudice, Bloomberg Radio.
Now we have Treasury yields plunging all across the curve this morning. As you look at oil, Brent crude, that tumbled below $30 a barrel, just slightly above that right now, $30.52. That is still just about a 10% decline. And a regional manufacturing index, that sank the most on record. Again, the Dow Jones Industrial Average 8% lower. The S&P 500 down 7.6%. The 10-year yield right now, the benchmark, 0.83%. That is down 12 basis points right now. We check the markets for you all day long in these turbulent markets. I'm John Tucker in the newsroom. Lisa and Paul, back to you guys.
Thank you so much, John. We are getting a briefing on the coronavirus. Governor Andrew Cuomo is currently speaking with reporters. Let's listen in.
You'll drive to New Jersey. Makes no sense. Well, then get the states to coordinate themselves. Yes, very hard to do. Luckily, we have set a template where our regional states work together. Many of you came to our regional meeting on marijuana laws, and I have a good relationship that I've developed with the surrounding governors. So we have actually deployed that here. And I just did a call with Governor Phil Murphy of New Jersey and Governor Ned Lamont of Connecticut, and we are adopting the same policies. So there is no benefit to try to shop New York versus Connecticut versus New Jersey. There will be no more gatherings of 50 plus people. So if you were hoping to plan a graduation party, you can't do it in the state of New York, you can't go do it in the state of New Jersey, and you can't do it in the state of Connecticut. Casinos, we all have casinos. If I close my casinos, but New Jersey keeps their casinos open, we're going to have the same problem. All casinos will be closed effective 8 p.m. tonight, and they will stay closed until further notice. On all these closings, they are all until further notice, and hopefully I can coordinate with the other governors so we can have the same opening period, just the way we had the same closing period. Gyms are closed effective 8 p.m. tonight. I know that's a specific hardship for the people in this room because I can all see you are in masterful shape, buff even. There are other ways to exercise. Theaters closing at 8 o'clock tonight until further notice. Any bar or restaurant closes at 8 o'clock tonight. However, there is a silver lining for these establishments because we're also very aware of the economic consequences for these establishments. So the state liquor authority is going to change its rules. They'll have guidance up by 5 p.m. this evening that will allow bars, restaurants, distilleries to sell their products off premises. So whatever you could get, whatever you could order in the bar or restaurant or distillery or winery, you can purchase through takeout. And we hope that goes a long way towards alleviating any economic hardship. Stay home and order from your favorite restaurant, order from your favorite bar, order from your favorite winery, order from whatever establishment that you were thinking of patronizing. Just order it and stay at home. And again, the State Liquor Authority will change their rules to allow that. It's not currently allowed. We will only allow it during this period of closure, but I think it will help those businesses. As you know, we've done a lot of work with the wineries and distilleries to grow that industry in New York, and I want to make sure we protect them. Now everybody is at home, and they're at home with their kids. My kids are a little older, but I remember the old days when you're in the house with a number of young kids. The house can get very small very quickly. The kids can get very rambunctious very quickly. We're going to waive all park fees in all state parks, local parks, county parks. So you want to get out of the house? Great. Go to the park. The weather's changing. Take a walk. Enjoy your family. And do it in an environment that is not a dense environment, which is exactly what the parks provide. Other actions, all local governments must reduce their workforce by 50% minimum. I'm directing all local governments to allow their non-essential personnel to stay home, work from home, with a 50% minimum. Local government can go higher than 50%, but it must be a 50% minimum. Work from home, which is the same thing I'm asking private businesses. If we can ask private businesses to do that, government, I think, leads by example. So not just for New York State government, which will do this also, all local governments, non-essential people work from home, and a minimum of 50% of the workforce must stay at home. Second, I'm directing local governments to make sure that all their local police departments and emergency management services are supplied with masks, surgical masks. You have police officers who are encountering people in all different circumstances, EMS workers who traditionally wear masks, police officers who traditionally do not. But I was at the New Rochelle drive-through testing center the other day. And, you know, if you're a police officer, you're walking up to a car, you're stopping a driver, they roll down the window. By definition, you're within more than 6 feet. You don't know who you're talking to. People are positive who don't even know that they're positive. I want all the police officers who are showing, all first responders, are showing great coverage, getting up, great courage, getting up and going out and doing their job every day. I want them to know that we understand the situation they're putting themselves in, and we're providing the necessary precautions. So every local government must provide their local police department, EMS workers, with masks. New York City, Nassau, Suffolk, Westchester, and Rockland must have child care, educational services, and meal programs in place by midnight. We said that those schools will be closing, but we need to take care of the negative, the downside of closing a school. This is not an easy decision. There are negatives when you close a school. Most notably, you don't have child care for essential personnel. You don't have child care for healthcare workers. Remember, please, the greatest challenge and the greatest damage is going to be done by an overwhelmed healthcare system. Nurses, healthcare workers, 1199 members don't have alternatives to child care. Public education is also this state's child care system. It's this nation's child care system. And it's not that easy to say, well, let them get a babysitter. They can't afford it. It's hard to find. And we would have created a true negative situation if we lost healthcare workers or first responders because we closed schools and they had to stay home with their children. This is solved easily enough. You're closing schools. Don't close all the schools. Leave a couple of schools open or parts of schools open to provide child care for the essential personnel. We also have to have meal programs and meal services in place and educational services in place. On that condition, I ordered the schools closed. But it's on that condition. And I want those plans and I want them in place by midnight, and they have to be approved. We strongly advise that only services and businesses that are essential stay open after 8 p.m. Grocery stores, gas stations, pharmacies, medical facilities. We want people home. We want less density. We strongly advise this. This is not mandatory, but it is strongly advised. And it's not mandatory at this time. And it may be in the future, but it is strongly advised at this time. Testing, we have had a phenomenal increase in testing. We've been able to use our laboratories. Our emergency management team has done a very good job of reaching out to our state labs, getting them on track, getting them coordinated. Our testing numbers are way up, as you'll see. Next week, by the end of this week, we think we're going to be up to about 7,000 tests per day, which is an exponential increase of what we have done. I made the suggestion to the Vice President. I made it to the President. I often tell you when I am unhappy with the federal response to this state. The fairness dictates that kudos where kudos are due, and here the Vice President and the President responded very quickly. So I want to thank them for that. We started a drive-through testing facility in New Rochelle, Westchester, where we have one of the highest clusters. It's one of the first in the United States. I believe actually the first on the eastern seaboard. It has worked very well. It's safe for everyone. You drive up in your car, you never get out of your car. You're tested in your vehicle. They take the test kits back. The time that it takes to take the test is actually faster than we thought. Doesn't normally happen in government. We allotted 15 minutes per car. It's actually running ahead of that schedule. We want to replicate that because it's just smart. The worst thing is a person walking into an emergency room. If you are positive, you infect other people. If you're negative, you may get infected by walking into the emergency room. So this is the best way to test someone. We said we were going to open one on Long Island after the positive New Rochelle experience. We're also going to open one on Staten Island. Staten Island does not have an abundance of hospitals. Staten Island is a community where people drive. And Staten Island, I believe, is an appropriate location for this. I also think that Staten Island feels that they have not gotten the level of attention of health services that they need. And I've spoken to Max Rose, I spoke to Senator Andrew Lanza, and I believe this is going to make a difference. We're also open one in Rockland County on the same theory. We're going to a new phase in this entire process. We talked about early detection. We've talked about testing. We talked about containment. You see those numbers are going up. That means you're moving towards a mitigation phase, and you're moving to a phase where you must expect a significant inflow into the hospital health care system. Now again, this is the great curve they talk about, plus or minus. Flatten the curve, flatten the curve, flatten the curve. That's what all you hear, that's what you hear every day on TV. You see this curve, we must flatten the curve. The concept is right. Flatten the curve, slow the spread so the healthcare system can handle it. When they say this, I don't think of a curve, I think of a wave. And the wave is going to break, and the wave is going to break on the hospital system. We're doing everything we can to flatten the curve. I believe we've taken more dramatic actions than any state in the United States. I believe we've had the most effective response of any state in the United States. I don't believe we're going to be able to flatten the curve enough to meet the capacity of the healthcare system. So in this business, plan ahead, plan forward. anticipate what's coming down the road and get ready for it. Expanding the capacity of the healthcare system for a state is virtually impossible. Building a hospital is a very elaborate, extensive, expensive undertaking. Again, we need the federal government to play its role. The federal government has tremendous capacity. I was in the federal government. I was a cabinet secretary. I worked with the military. I worked with the Army Corps of Engineers. They have tremendous capacity. This is what they do. This is what they do. They build airports. They build bridges. They build hospitals. This is exactly what they do. Deploy the Army Corps of Engineers to come work with states to build temporary medical facilities. Get us backup beds. So when the hospital is overwhelmed, we can have some of the people who are in the hospital beds go to a backup medical facility. It makes all the sense in the world. And if you don't do it, you know what is going to happen. You're going to overwhelm the hospitals. You only have 53,000 hospital beds. You only have 3,000 ICU beds. Why? Because our health system is basically a private system. They don't build capacity that they don't need. They don't build extra ICU beds just in case. An intensive care bed is very expensive. They don't build a wing of ICU beds that sit vacant for 10 years on the off chance that there's going to be a public health emergency and you'll need the beds. They don't. It's not economic. It's not their business model. So we don't have them. We have the capacity that people use day in and day out. And that's not just New York, that's every state in the United States. You now have this influx, you can't handle it. You overwhelm the hospitals. You have people on gurneys in hallways. That is what is going to happen now if we do nothing. That is what is going to happen now if we do nothing. And that, my friends, will be a tragedy. We know what lies ahead. Look at the numbers from China, South Korea, and Italy. You don't have to guess. You just have to project. The numbers are on a chart. Our numbers are on a chart. Just extend the current trajectory. Just go dot, 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 and you'll see the numbers rise, and you compare those numbers to our hospital capacity, and it's still math at the end of the day. And it doesn't work. The federal government must do this. Assume the federal government doesn't do what the federal government is supposed to do, which would not be a wild assumption, as it hasn't happened to date. Well, then, as a fallback, the states have to do whatever they have to do. And the state has to mobilize to create backup medical facilities. And that is what we are going to do. We're going to organize the National Guard, work with the building unions, and work with private developers to find existing facilities that could most easily be adapted to medical facilities. Meaning what? Meaning dormitories, meaning former nursing homes, facilities that have that basic configuration that could be retrofit. Even that is not easy because you have the construction element and you also have the equipment element. It is very, very hard to get medical equipment now because everybody on the globe is trying to buy the same medical equipment. Everybody wants to buy a ventilator. Everybody wants to buy oxygen. Everybody is trying to buy the same equipment, and it's terribly scarce. That's why I go back again to the capacity of the federal government, which operates and maintains a medical emergency stock where they have stocked medical equipment for domestic issues or for wartime. Right? When you go to war and they set up a wartime hospital, they have equipment. They have it stockpiled. That's why they're uniquely suited to do this. But in any event, we're going to do the best we can. I need, first and foremost, to find available facilities that can be converted. And I'm asking local governments, especially in the most dense area, to immediately identify a number of beds in facilities that are available. Frankly, I hope they're surplus because we don't have, this is very expensive, and I don't want to pay money for acquisition of property and real estate. But we need the communities that are most effective to begin finding available beds. New York City, we estimate conservatively, we at this point should identify 5,000 additional beds, Nassau 1,000 additional beds, Suffolk 1,000 additional beds, Westchester 2,000 additional beds. Why more for Westchester? Westchester has the New Rochelle cluster, which, as you know, has a significant number of people who tested positive. We will do everything we can, but we need federal assets and we need federal assistance. I am very proud of this state government and what it can do. And we have done things that no state government has done before. We built bridges, we built airports, we've responded to emergencies. But know what you can't do. We don't have the billions of dollars that you would need to implement an immediate emergency hospital construction program. This state can't do it. No state can do it. To increase hospital capacity of the existing hospitals in the meantime, the